On this episode of The Open Road, America! Today we're taking a look at the Chev Silverado. These are being brought in by HSV. The whole relationship between GM, Holden, HSV and Chevrolet has been quite changed up since the fact that they're not being made in Australia anymore, so kind of gives GM an opportunity to get a few different products out here, and I assume that HSV is sort of testing the waters with these a little bit, so let's take a closer look. The styling on the front of these is interesting. I personally really like it, but the feedback's been a bit mixed. Personally, I'd go for the white with the black out, but you can also get it in black on black on black, which does look pretty cool. The rear tray on this is huge. You'll easily fit a Suzuki Swift in here if you wanted to. I just feel like the styling hasn't made it all the way to the back. It just seems a little bit bland. The first thing you notice about the interior is the sheer size of it. There is a lot of space in this truck. Even the back seats are huge and very easily accommodate someone my size. Being a big American truck, it's got big, fat, chunky buttons, lots of little chrome accents, things like that. All of the doors have got lots of cubbies and there's lots of little bits and pieces tucked away. The main center console is absolutely massive. The center console box is huge and it's even got a coin dispenser, and who uses coins anymore? Overall, it's just a very well appointed and very well equipped vehicle. It's a nice place to be. Nice big comfy leather seats. These seats are very comfortable, very adjustable. And yeah, I think we should just take it for a drive though. The first thing you notice as soon as you climb into this car, or this truck, is that one, you have to climb up into it, and two, it is big. Like, between me and the windscreen is about 2 foot, and then there's another 5 foot past that. It's a lot of vehicle to be moving around, particularly in a tight space like the city. The other thing that doesn't particularly help is that the steering's fine. It's a little bit on the heavy side, but it's fine. Like, it's easy to use. But it's got a very, very, very large turning circle, which means when it comes to ducking into that park or getting around a tight roundabout, things like that, a little bit tricky. Something that you also notice quite quickly is that because it is column shift, the indicator stalk, which is now on the left, does everything. So everything that both indicators would normally do, both indicator stalks, except for the headlights, everything else is done on one indicator stalk. So you've got your normal indicators, you've got your normal high beam, low beam, and your flash, but then if you want to clean your windscreen, that's a little lever, and then if you want to change how fast your wipers are going, that's another lever. That's a little rotator here. It's a little bit on the long side, obviously, but that's something that you sort of get used to quite quickly. Like, I was at first throwing it quite wide around tighter stuff, which you don't need to do all the time. It's not a bad thing to get in the habit of, but it's not something you need to do all of the time. It's not quite that long. But like, even just the power delivery, so like, you put your foot down and you expect it to be a bit sluggish and slow off the line. Like, you can put your foot down a little bit more and it'll take off just like any other car. You won't be holding people up and it won't feel like you're driving around in a massive pig. Yeah, the brakes on these, really impressive. Emergency stopping. I mean, it's not going to stop on a dime because you've got a lot of weight to stop, but the brakes that are on here, pretty damn good actually. I was surprised. I was expecting this thing to take a little while to slow down, but I mean, I guess if you really think about it, when this is at tow capacity, you're going to want those brakes. What's actually super funny driving this car around the city is it has no shortage of reactions. In fact, I would go so far as to say this vehicle has had the most reactions of any test drive car I've ever driven. And that's kind of funny. And there's only really two. The first one is like, thumbs up, awesome truck. And, so you just sort of throw them down one of those, yeah, man, cool. And it's all good. And then the other one is relative to, I bet you have a really small penis. To which I would reply, and I have, is, typically they don't. You've either got your right hand on the wheel and your left elbow on the center console, or you've got your left hand on the wheel and your right elbow out the window, which I did the other day. And I had all the heaters on, had the heated seats on. It was cold, but I looked cool, and that was the important thing, is I looked really, really cool. But a couple of other little things I noticed as well. For example, normally for your audio buttons, for your skip track and your volume, or where your thumbs are on the steering wheel, Here, because you've got so many buttons on the steering wheel, they've put them where a paddle shift might be. So on your right hand side you've got up and down for volume, and on your left hand side you've got forward and back for tracks, or what if you're going to change your radio station, things like that. Just, I mean, you don't know that they're there and you don't know what they do until you push the button, but I like pushing buttons, so now I know. It's not a steep learning curve. The system itself is good. The speakers are really good. It's a Bose premium system because this is the high-end offering for this truck, and it sounds amazing. It's the same system. It's the Chev MyLink, which is basically exactly the same as the Holden MyLink. There's a couple little differences. I think the major difference is that the way that these things have been converted and recalibrated and re-engineered to be part of the New Zealand market is that there's no sat-nav, which is a little bit unfortunate because I do use it a little bit, but you can always just use your phone. There's actually a neat little cubby that you can just drop your phone into and you can see it really nicely. When I picked this up, it's, you scroll through the menus and stuff, and I noticed that the fuel economy gives you the last 100 kilometres, and whoever had this before me was averaging 20 litres per 100 kilometres of diesel. That is a lot. In the time that I've had it, well, certainly in the last 100 kilometres, where I've driven from Cowcop to Auckland City and around the city a little bit, and this is actually quite a bit of city driving, I've averaged 13.6, and my best today was 12.7 litres per 100 kilometres, which for a V8, I mean, yeah, it's diesel, but for a V8 and something this big, that's not unreasonable. Granted, we're not towing anything. You start adding weight and things like that, yeah, that's gonna go up, of course, but I can only review it on what experiences I've had, and because this doesn't have the tow bar, yeah, we don't know. Right now we're sitting at just over half a tank, and if I check the distance left at the current settings of what we've achieved for the economy, it's got over 600 kilometres of range left. That would imply that if I filled this up, I could drive to Wellington and back to Auckland on a tank of gas under the current circumstances. That's pretty impressive, not gonna lie. It's a big tank, but you don't have to stop fill up. That's kind of cool. Given that these are made for the American market and then in the same factory, taken apart, put back together again for the New Zealand market and the Australian market, there are a lot of features on here that you would expect to see in cold countries where, like in America, you get some very cold areas. For example, there are heated ring mirrors. Lots of little bits and pieces like that are, nice to have, probably never going to use. Something that I would like that this does not have is not lane departure. It's got that. What it doesn't have is blind spot assistance. Now, the visibility, if you're looking around, is not bad at all. You can actually see quite a lot. I would say that these pillars here are a little bit intrusive. Just a couple of times I've noticed when I've been looking for stuff, the pillar's been a thing and I've had to, Given that this doesn't have blind spot assistance, which is typically just a little yellow light that comes up in your wing mirror, because I don't have that, it does, you spend a lot more time looking around just to make sure that you're not going to drive over a Civic, because you are so big and so long and there is so much of you on the road, there's a lot of space here that you just can't allocate for. Like, there's a car that's just behind me in my blind spot, which if I can't see it in my mirror, I still can't see it out my peripherals. Would have been a nice to have. I don't know why they didn't put it in. The gearbox in this car it's actually not interesting at all, and that's not a detriment. It just does what it's supposed to do. You put it in drive and you pretty much forget about it. Actually, the power on the motorway is an interesting thing. If you put your foot down, this thing will get up and boogie, and it's surprising how much it'll get up and boogie. Like, I probably wouldn't want to be doing any risky sort of 80 to 110 passing maneuvers, but, if you're on the motorway and you want to get around someone, you've got all the power in the world. And it's also something noted when, like, for example, the road that I live on is quite steep to get up to, and it's a 100k road, but, like the Land Cruiser, for example, does it at about 80. This thing, it cruises up at 100, and you put your foot down and you can go, I would imagine, if someone were to try it, a lot more than that. What I have noticed is on the the motorways and the expressways and roads like that, is that when you're sitting at 100k, this is actually really, really quiet, and it's really, really smooth. It's I'm going to put that down to quality sound deadening, which goes back to GM have made these cars for HSV back in the States, and so you've got that factory quality sound deadening, and it's not, like they haven't taken lots of parts out. So you get a factory car which, has good sound deadening, and it has a good sound system, and it's, things like that. The other thing I'd put it down to is that the tyres on this were actually, they're a adaptation of another tyre which has been custom made for this vehicle, and one of the specifics that they were looking for when they made that tyre was to get rid of that whine that you get from big heavy like soft rubber tyres that make a hell of a noise on the road. The thing is with a truck like this is that ultimately, first and foremost, is it's a tool. It's a utilitarian vehicle to get a job done. So in that, you don't expect a huge amount of creature comforts, which this actually does have. And I guess, if you look at where these trucks come from and how they get used from where they come from, it makes a lot of sense. These things are designed to, to a race car trailer across state lines and across countries. We don't do a lot of that in New Zealand. But what we do get is, you'll get the speedway guys who are going to be going from one part of the country to another part of the country with a, trailer with a vehicle and all the spare parts and stuff like that. And those people might be doing it now in your Land Cruiser or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm getting at is that this is the next level. You've got wireless cell phone charging, you've got great air conditioning, we've got heated and cooling seats, we've got, the heating system in this is great, the sound system in this is great, the seating is great, even people in the back, you get big burly dudes in the back. The back size is huge. And it's another next level of refinement that we've never really seen in New Zealand, because these vehicles haven't really been in great demand. But what I'm assuming is that when people get in them, drive them, see what they're all about, obviously it's not going to be priced for everybody, but it is going to be one of those things where people might drive it and go, wow, this is what I want to tow my race car or my fifth wheel or whatever you're towing. Now that we're on a proper back road, a proper-ish back road, this is the kind of what I assume that this sort of vehicle would be doing a lot of in this country, which is going to be long distance on back roads that aren't motorways. I think the only detriment that I've noticed, and this goes back to the suspension in the city, is that because it's sprung to have a lot of weight carried around in it, when you don't have that weight, it makes a big difference. So you really got to figure out whether or not you're going to be driving around with a lot of weight in this vehicle more often than not, because if not, what you probably might want to do, which is certainly something I would consider, is changing the leaf springs in the rear end and the shocks or whatever, just to make it a little bit more supple, because it's not bad, it's not super bad, but you do notice that the back end will kick up a bit when it's, it'll hit a bump, and then the rebound's a bit much and whatever, and the spring rate's just too high because it's designed for having, tons of weight, tons and tons of weight. You could easily drive this thing 6-ton combined weight and it'll do it very, very easily. But then when you take all that weight out, it's still got its muscles flexed, and that's a compromise that you have to live with if you bought this car like I would for vanity. But changing leaf springs and shocks, not that big of a deal. In fact, you probably just take the wheel. You probably wouldn't even have to jack it up, it's that big. But yeah, out here on the open road, eating up the miles. It's a comfy place to be. Actually, something interesting. I can understand why people would find a vehicle like this, at first at least, very intimidating to drive, because it is so much mass to move around. And you do notice that when you're driving it. If you're at 100k on a road like this, like a back road, you notice how much weight you're moving. And that can be a little bit intimidating, but it's actually not that hard to drive. Placing this vehicle exactly where you want it on the road, which goes back to my Hoon days, it's easy. It's very, very easy. You can put this thing exactly where you want it on any piece of road. And that's a comfort, because you don't want to feel like it's a challenge to drive, which it isn't, but I can understand why it might be intimidating at first. But like I said, I've been driving this thing for a week, and now it just feels like very easy to drive. Nothing really spooks me in this anymore. and I don't really have to compensate for anything or, you know, actively think about anything different from driving any other vehicle. I guess the only thing would really be is if you're towing something, you know, you're probably thinking about that extra braking distance, or, you know, maybe not cutting that corner quite so much. But outside of that, no, it's super easy. You know, you just pick your line on the bend or whatever it is, and it's not even that wide. Like, I went over the harbour bridge in the single lane because it was closed down to one, and that puckered up my butthole. It was scary. But this isn't much wider than a standard car. In fact, I don't think it's much wider than anything major. So once you understand that, and you understand where your corners are and stuff, you can thread this pretty much anywhere. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. So conclusion time, eh? This baby can fit so many Suzuki Swifts in it, but I kid, of course. The real ultimate thing is, would I buy one of these? You're goddamn right I would. I think these trucks are absolutely brilliant. They can tow anything, and ultimately they are the coolest thing on the road. Personally, I'd probably customize it a little bit, get that suspension sorted, some shiny wheels, but I'd totally own one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.